Welcome to World's Public Record, the podcast that tries to offer you something to think about without telling you what to think. I'm Dwayne Williams, historian, educator, father, and recovering point guard. I have a lot I want to talk about today. In particular, I want to get you thinking about America in the year 250. A lot of things have been battered around and bantering around, and I think I got a take on it that I really want you to really give you some food for thought. And if everything works out, I'll give you something that you couldn't have gotten unless you came here. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to my friends at the HP 53 production, the people who put me on the platform and gave me a lot of love, as Mac, Rob, and of course, Sarah, keep smiling like you in the Hall & Oates song. I appreciate it so much. Also want to shout out to all my friends in the 2858 crew in Chicago. Cannot forget the Williams sisters and the Brown girls. As we like to say, Dad's love is real. Of course, my BFF holding down the Mountain and the Pacific time zone, the good Dr. Joe, saving lives out there in Arizona. And of course, my ball and chain, my Lovejoy. I want you and everyone else to get ready to go on a trip around the world. To do that, I want us to ask this question. When you think about history, what comes to mind? When you think about America in history, what comes to mind? What things shape you? What things bother you? What things scare you? What do you want to know more about? What do you want to know less about? I've been thinking a lot about these things in this year because by trade, I'm a historian. And the way I've gotten to that is I've been listening and re-listening to John Coltrane's epic jazz suite, The Love Supreme. If you don't know Coltrane, I'll consider him a secular saint of the saxophone. And his meditations on meaning and awakening and forgiveness are the kinds of things that I think are metaphors for how we should think about history in the year 2025. I think in particular, one of the things that's really kind of pushed me is that each week, or as close to each week, I take a walk on the National Mall. Now, if you're not familiar with Washington, D.C., the mall is a complex of museums in D.C. that if you're lucky, you're not rushed through all the museums. Typically, I see people from Idaho and Iowa walking around trying to figure out what are these monuments, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial. There are tons of things to see. But when I'm walking on a mall, I'm walking in a more deliberate and reflective way. I usually start, for instance, at the Ulysses S. Grant statue. I am from Chicago, from Illinois, and I end with Lincoln. And on a good day, I try to make it all the way from Grant to Lincoln. But if I don't, what I try to do is go into at least one of the museums and take a little time. Usually people will call me and they'll say, hey, Dwayne, I want to see 5 things. I want to see 10 things. And I always tell them, there is no way you can cover all the things you want to see in a short period of time you have here. This is not a 2-day trip. It's not a 3-day trip. In a perfect world, when you come to Washington, you should take it in doses, take it in bites, take it in kind of, different servings. And for me as a historian, the point isn't to try to get through stuff. It's to really come back to it, to think about it, think about what its meaning is. And of course, this year is a good reason to do it. And I think that given that Coltrane's Love Supreme starts with one of the most beautiful kind of songs, suites, if you will, in jazz, and it's acknowledgment. And one of the things I want us to think about is in this year 250, what things should we be acknowledging about American history? What things should people know more of? What should we be more honest about? And frankly, where should we be going in the years ahead? Here's the problem. In this particular episode, in all episodes that come, I usually try to frame it around what I call my 3 C's: context, content, and connection. I'm talking about something, I want to know what's the context, what's really going on, why is this something I should kind of know about, what is the thing I should walk away with knowing more about, And then, of course, we all live busy lives. So the question becomes, why is any of these things, any of these issues, any issue important for the life that we're all trying to lead? Now, let's start with this. We can agree that 2026 marked the 250th anniversary of the United States. That's good, that's bad, and sometimes that's ugly. We can agree that there's lots to know, lots to learn, and things that we should know more about. Now, here comes the kicker. Back in March, about 2 days after my birthday, this is a great late belated birthday, and the current president, Donald Trump, issued an Executive Order 14253, which he entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity in American History. I'm not sure what truth he was thinking about. I'm not sure what sanity he was talking about. But it was clear to me that the president had a particular view on history that didn't align with mine, and that his view was about American exceptionalism, American so-called greatness. And at the end of the day, it was a kind of call for an American history that left most people out. He followed that up by having his White House Domestic Council issue a 162-page report entitled Saving America's Story. Again, not sure what we're trying to save America from its past, from its future, from its truth. I don't know. But what got my attention was that last week, there were a series of congressional hearings in which the head of the National Museum of American History was called to Congress to explain, hey, what is going on here in response to this report. So Congress and the president have decided, hey, we have to protect history. We have to get the story right. We have to make sure that people know what's really going on and know the quote unquote truth. So they hauled up the head of the National Museum of American History, asked a series of questions, trying to really force her into saying, "Hey, why do you hate America?" And she was just kind of flabbergasted about it. Like, I don't hate America. We're in the business of telling America's story. By the end of that particular hearing, in which the great David Blight really laid out really the historian's view that at the end of the day, we're in the business of telling stories, not making stories up. But one of the things I found very interesting was that at the end of that hearing, the president then called for signs, warning signs, alerts to be put up outside of the National Museum of American History, because in his view, the people working in the Smithsonian, working at the National Museum of American History, were producing history that was inaccurate, and they needed to be warned before they get in there because their minds might be shaped or mesmerized by this ideology. And I don't know if you've ever been in the National Museum of American History. You should. All right. If you're lucky, if you're like one of those eighth graders or high school students who come here, I hope that you get a chance to go to the museum. It is an amazing, amazing museum. But one of the things that it does is that it raises the question that America is good and is ugly too. But the president was like, nope, cannot have that. We need to have these signs outside. And I'm of the thought that the signs should never be put up. And the problem I have is this. The National Museum of American History is a great space of public education, a great space of a great space for teaching and learning public history. Most people, when they come to a museum, when they come to a memorial, when they come to a monument, that's how they learn history. And so the problem is that Trump's call for a warning sign would be laughable if it wasn't so potentially consequential. It matters how we learn history. It matters what our approach is. And here's the challenge that I have. Who am I going to trust to help me think what I want to think about history? Who's going to be the person that's going to guide me? Is it going to be Donald Trump? Is it going to be a historian? Is it going to be my friends, my family? Look, Americans love to argue about stuff. We argue about our sports teams. I'm a Chicago Bear fan. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I like all Chicago teams except the Cubs. I'm sorry. But when I argue, my point isn't always to convince my friends, my family, my colleagues. It's really to say, hey, let's have an invitation for a conversation. And contentiousness is a good thing. Okay? Debate is a good thing. What isn't good is silence. What isn't good is the idea that somehow if you silence people, if you keep them quiet, then they'll get it right and your version will dominate. I'm not quite sure about that. Here's my thought. Rather than put up signs, I would argue that let's start where Coltrane starts with acknowledgement. Let's acknowledge that the taking of the indigenous lands, that the enslavement of those people of African descent, that the persistent denial of the humanity of women, that, how should I put this, that the idea that someone who's from the LGBT community is not a citizen, that those things, if we acknowledge them rather than deny them, we have less disdain about history. Now I'm not naive. The president is not in the business of facts. He's not in the business of denial. But I think that one of the things that we could do if we were serious in the year 250 is talk very carefully about what things need to be acknowledged. Because those who until recently had their stories marginalized, pushed to the edges, know that only half the story has been told. And the irony is this. Dr. King once says, you cannot have great disappointment in America unless you have great love. Because I want to love the country so much that I wanted to get it right. I wanted to uphold its ideals, its values, to live them true, to manifest them. And when you don't, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to hate. All right. I'm going to insist that you do the thing you said you were going to do. Now, there are 2 million people who come to the National Museum of American History each year. 2 million. Those 2 million people are taking different things from the United States, different things about the history of the United States. Those 2 million people are not coming there to be brainwashed. They're not coming there to be whitewashed. What they're coming for is to see what part of the American story do I find compelling? What part of the American story do I learn something new about? And what would I want done differently? Again, it is okay for us to be good and ugly too. But to hear President Trump talk about it, rather than have that exposure, he sees his job, his mandate, if you will, is to protect the American people. Now, the founding director of the National Museum of African American History, and now the unfortunately embattled head of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch, once said this: "History is too important to be entrusted to historians." I agree with him. But I also think it's too important to be entrusted to an inconsistent, to a dangerous, might I say, president who's really focused on destabilizing confidence in American institutions, including history. And so when I got an invitation from one of my friends, a colleague of mine, to go down this week to offer up a silent kind of civic protest, I joined him. We went in front of the National Museum of American History, and all we did was hold 2 signs. And this is what the sign said: "We don't want the executive branch to tell us what to think about history. We don't need protection." And my sign just simply said, which was the truth: African American history matters. The lives of African Americans matter. Now you might say, wait a minute, isn't that obvious? Don't all lives matter? If all lives matter, and African Americans matter, and women matter, and Latinos matter, and Muslims matter, and any iteration of the American identity matters, then it has to be a part of our National Museum. And you should go in and make your own choices. Seems obvious. Wherever you are on the ideological spectrum, you should be okay with the idea that I'm good. I don't need protection from the president about what's there. All right. There's no fear of bias. There's no fear of of someone really changing my mind. This is what I tell my students. When we are writing history, we use my three R's. Historians reconstruct by using their sources. They use those sources to then rewrite history, and then they offer up interpretation. There are many interpretations about history. They can coexist, right? There are hundreds of books, thousands of books written about the Civil War. I'm not telling you what to think about the Civil War. I'm offering you my perspective. There isn't one narrative about American history. There are multiple narratives. And as long as they can coexist, then we can trust that people can make their own decisions. That's my idea. The acknowledgement is part of it. If you can get to acknowledgement, you might move to the next stage of Coltrane's piece, which is resolution. Here's the dig. Based on the available evidence, I'm not a firm believer that the current president really wants to resolve the social, economic, and political problems that face this country. I think he's more comfortable destabilizing because destabilization of people's confidence allows him to deflect. Donald Trump would be more comfortable waging a cultural war with an institution like the Smithsonian than resolving the war in Iran, than resolving gas prices and food prices. There's a link because at the end of the day, people cannot imagine things they cannot see. They cannot see things they can't imagine. They can't imagine. So if you never make it to the museum, you never know what's in there. If you go in there and you assume that there's going to be something there that's going to be traumatizing for you, then you're approaching history in the wrong way. Really, history is a way of asking questions, and it's a place for asking questions. And the answers are not like math and science, where there's a great certainty. There's a possibility of interpretation. The president won't have that. In the president's mind, any institution, especially a museum like the National Museum of American History, has to be one that celebrates American exceptionalism. And again, I want to say this. If the president was interested truly in making sure that America could be great, then he would allow the space for all those great stories to exist and then say, guess what? What makes us great isn't that we're one of one, isn't that we've conquered. What makes us great is that despite the good and the bad and the ugly too, we've been able to achieve the things we've achieved. And that those achievements, that wellspring of achievement has come from a wide range of Americans. It's that thing that makes us great. It isn't the exception. It isn't the taking, the expropriation. It isn't all those litany of things that have impeded Americans to be great. It's the fact that in spite of those barriers, America has made its way into a country that is transformative. To hear the president, the idea that someone might be transformed by the truth reminds me of the great John Hope Franklin, the great historian who said this: we have an obligation to tell the unvarnished truth. Americans can handle hard history. They can handle hard truths. What they can't handle is silence about things that matter. History matters. It doesn't matter because I'm a historian. It matters because it is literally present in everything that we do. It is literally present in everything that we do. And we have a national museum, a monument, if you will, an institution, you will, that is in the business whose mission is the following. The National Museum of American History has this mission. And you have to tell me, what problem would you have with this, Mr. President? The mission of the National Museum of American History is to, quote, empower people to create a just and compassionate future by exploring, preserving, and sharing the complexities of our past. America is many things after 250 years. And I think the idea that it is complex, that it is good and it's ugly too, that it has hard truths and hard realities and great triumphs, all those things are there. And this is a museum that, like so many museums, has met the challenge to become the country's most accessible, inclusive, and I would say sustainable public history institutions. Again, I want to say this. Most of us learn history from monuments, from museums, from memorials, what we know, what we think is important. That is why people fight so hard to have streets named after people, monuments named after people. What they're saying is these are the things in the American experience that matter. And if those things are invisible, if those things are unknown, then really you're saying it doesn't matter. It matters less. It didn't contribute as much. And in a time when people are questioning the competencies of all kinds of people, this should be the moment where we are acknowledging, where we are trying to seek resolutions to those things that maybe we made different choices about. This is the time when we're reaching resolution about not being stuck. And again, I'll go back to Coltrane. It's also a time when we are in the pursuance of a different path that hopefully will land us in the last song in that great suite, a moment of psalm, when we can be at peace with the truth, we can be at peace with who we are, who we become, and who we once were. History is about change over time. I'm often telling students that. What is your equation? My equation is change over time. It's not static. We shouldn't be the same country in 2026 as we were in 1926 or 1826. And we shouldn't be the same country in 3026. The reality is that we change and we use those sources to allow us to say, how are we changing? To ask those kinds of questions. So in this 250th year of our country, I hope we are asking questions about who we are, and they were asking and expecting acknowledgement, seeking unvarnished truth, and not asking the president to give us signs that can protect us. I want to end tonight with one of my favorite poems by the great poet Lucille Clifton. It's called I'm Accused of Tending to the Past. It's kind of where my thinking is right now in this 250th anniversary. I'm going to go back to Coltrane. But here's what I have. Here's Lucille Clifton. I'm accused of tending to the past as if I made it, as if I sculpted it with my own hands. I did not. The past was waiting for me when I came, a monstrous, unnamed baby, and I, with my mother's itch, took it to breast and named it history. She's more human now, learning language every day, remembering faces, names, and dates. When she is strong enough to travel on her own, beware, she will. The history of America after 250 years is a moment of becoming. We don't want to be stuck in what I would call magical thinking about the past, in which only the center of our history is only that of the experiences of a small number of people. Our country is great because it is broad and is wide, and because it has triumphed over those moments when we were not at our best. You're listening to World's Public Record. And tonight we're asking the question, do we need signs to guide and protect us from our history, or do we need unvarnished truth? Do we need more acknowledgement? To help you continue with this conversation, I want to invite you to listen to to read some more. Please join us on the HP53 platform, hp53.com, so you can learn about how we can extend this conversation. I've written an essay about the topic and invite any kind of feedback from folks. In addition to that, I want to ask folks to consider picking up a couple of texts that I've been reading and thinking about and kind of jousting about. The first is In the Hour of Chaos, Art and Activism with Public Enemy's Chuck D. Now, Chuck D is the front man for the legendary hip hop group Public Enemy, and through the 80s and 90s and beyond, he's really made sure that hip hop really was telling a story about not just music, but the call to action. And one of the things I like about Chuck D and many of the people in the hip hop community is this, that really the music isn't just about the rhythm, it's about the purpose, it's about the action, it's about doing. So please pick up The Hour of Chaos, Art and Activism with Public Enemy's Chuck D. Secondly, I would urge you to look very carefully at this recent article that appeared in the New York Times by Ishmael Muhammad called How a Novelist of the American past, recover his in, faith in its future. It's a piece about Colson Whitehead, the great American novelist, who's written a number of novels that are worth reading. I'm currently reading, excuse me, oops, I'm currently reading his Harlem Shuffle, which is part of a trilogy. But the thing I like about this piece about both Colson Whitehead and the piece about him is this. Colson Whitehead came up at a time around the same time I did, in which the idea of identity is being socially constructed. He kind of rejected, thought, well, social construction means you can kind of do anything you want, you can make it up, it doesn't have meaning. I reject that idea. Social construction means that the social, political, and cultural issues that are shaping and define us give meaning to particular things, and we have to understand that that meaning can be contested. What does it mean to be a man, to be a woman, to be a human, to be a citizen, to be a black person? What does black mean? All those questions, they don't mean it doesn't mean you can make it up. It means we have to look specifically at history to determine how do we come to understand this and how did it change over time? How do we go from Negro to colored to black to Afro American to African American? How do we do that? How did that evolution occur? It's the same group of people, but the meaning has changed because the circumstances on the ground have changed. That's history. That's changed over time. I think the piece in the New York Times does a good job of looking at the evolution of Colson Whitehead, does a great job of looking at and raising the question about how he's used the form of the novel to explore history's past, the American past. I love the piece. And then, of course, because 2026 is also the celebration of John Coltrane's 100th birthday, I think I would be remiss if I didn't tell everyone to listen to John Coltrane's Love Supreme and to go deep into that well of his discography. Coltrane, even though he died at 40 in 1967, left us a body of work which to me can serve as an apt metaphor about how do you mediate the meaning of life, of a country, and of history. And so I leave you with the idea that history is about doing, history is not about fear, history is about confronting the unvarnished truths about who we are and being okay with it. You're listening to World's Public Record. I'm Dwayne Williams, historian, educator, father, recovering point guard, peace and solidarity.